Righty. Welcome everybody. My name's Tim Graham and I'm excited to have you all here tonight for tonight's webinar. I'm really excited to be bringing you something a little bit different this evening. We've called this session Deal or No Deal. And yes, it is inspired by the game show, but with a property investment twist. I'm joined tonight by a good friend of our Hotspotting business and one of Australia's leading commercial and residential buyers agents, Steve Palise of Palise Property. Steve, welcome. How are you today?
Tim, it's 10 a.m. I'm in UK at the moment for the next couple of months working from here, hence why I've got the natural sun, well, I should say natural bright cloudy
Hey,
England light on.
I don't know what's going on with the lights in here, but I look like an Oompa Loompa on that orange. I don't know what's happening in here.
You're not that short, mate.
That's it. It's the size and the color tonight. I don't know what's happening. It shows how long it's been since I've done a night webinar though.
Yeah, thanks for that because you've obviously done that for me because obviously the UK time, so I appreciate it.
We have to accommodate these international guests.
Well, without sounding arrogant, the whole reason I built a passive income is because I wanted to live the lifestyle of traveling constantly. So part of that is being overseas and making the time zone work. Funnily enough, like I do 4 months travel a year. It doesn't actually change my life that much at all because we've got a little one, a 2-year-old, as you know.
Yep.
So waking up at 4 a.m., which is your like 1 p.m.
Yeah.
It's still all right. So you just work 1 to 11 p.m. and then you've got the whole afternoon off.
Yeah, that's the way. Well, I'll be doing exactly that tomorrow morning, getting up at 4 a.m. with the little one to catch a flight. So
that's always good
all
fun.
part of the fun. All right. Well, it looks like we've got a good turnout tonight. So for everybody who's joining us, the plan for tonight, we're going to talk for about 45 minutes. Steve's going to walk through a range of different property scenarios where he's basically assessed these as they're real deals that you've prepared for customers. And as we know, some of these case studies we've obviously proceeded with for your clients, and others you've said, no, this is not going to work. And that's the part where it's going to get interactive tonight. So Steve's going to present a scenario and we're going to say, is this a deal that you would go with or no deal? And of course, you're not going to have all the backstory on this. So we don't expect that there's going to be a report card or anything at the end, just a bit of fun. But at the end of that, Steve's going to tell us why they did or didn't proceed with it. And, as you know, in property investment, you get something right, you have a really good run, you get something wrong, and all of a sudden you've got maybe an investment that's going to just pour money out of your pocket every day, every month. So it's really important that, when you're looking at investments, the ones that you walk away from are just as important as the ones that you actually proceed with. So at the end of the
more important, Tim.
More important. That's probably a good point.
Yeah, because like you can literally ruin yourself for 5-10 years if you choose the wrong investment, especially with commercial, which we'll go into on some of the commercial deals.
And am I right in saying we've got a bit of a mixture between residential and commercial tonight as well?
Yeah, a bit of a focus on commercial, but I threw a couple little resis in just to let people know that resi is not risk-free as well.
Yeah, good stuff. So we will allow for 15 minutes at the end of tonight's session as well for Q&A. Look, if there's things that come up throughout the presentation and you want to ask some questions, by all means, throw it in the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on it. If there's something I think that's relevant for the situation there, we'll throw the question across to Steve. Otherwise, as I say, we'll try to get to as many of them as we can by the end of it. All right, Steve. Well, did you want to kick things off by telling us a little bit about how you prepared for this, or do you want to just jump straight into the first property?
So I literally just chose a variety of deals just to give people a different. I chose. I know not everyone's got a high budget, so I chose reasonable properties. So I'm not going to show you guys like a 27 mil deal I've done or a 12 mil deal. They're all in that kind of like sub 2 million price point. So real deals. But what you see is exactly what we present to the client initially.
Yeah.
For the commercial ones anyway, you actually go under contract subject to due diligence.
Yeah.
And we normally have 14 days due diligence. That, to be honest, is where the real work starts and where most of the time we actually crash the deal or not crash the deal. And that takes 30 to 40 hours because you got things like lease review, contract review, tenant interviews, road and traffic analysis, vacancy study, occupancy study, checking leases are registered, competition analysis. Like there's quite a lot to actually go through. So when you originally get the deal, you don't get all the information. So it actually is a lot harder, especially for a commercial investor, to sign on the dotted line, unlike residential, not knowing exactly what you're going to find.
Yeah.
But with the due diligence clause, you actually get to crash the deal penalty free. You get your full deposit back, lick your wounds a little bit because you might have spent a bit on like conveyancing or lease reviews and things like that. But as we mentioned, going ahead with the wrong deal is going to cost you way more than just kind of crashing.
Yeah, I've heard you say on another on one of our ticker episodes, you said if with residential when you get it wrong, you fall down a step. when you get it wrong
Yeah.
with commercial, you fall down the whole staircase.
Yeah, exactly right. The resi one I like, I don't want to sugarcoat it because people just say, oh, residential is not as risky as commercial. It is if you still do something silly. Like
Mm,
you've seen lots of people go buy like an off the plan high density apartment in like a
yeah,
Perth or something like that, where it's worth $150,000 less than when they bought it. Or they
yeah.
go a bit silly and go out and buy in a mining town or get a house with termite issues or whatever. There's still, but it's just like you said, there's less things to fall down on.
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, let's get into it. Let's start with your first property, which is in Boundary Road. Is it Warcol? I haven't heard of Warcol before.
Yeah, it's in that kind of southwest area just outside the city.
Yep.
This is just a typical clean and tidy, like, is this the one I'm looking at? Oh, it's like, oh no, we've got it in different order. We're going the other order. Okay, let me go back. We're going
Oh,
from,
I can go. I can start at this end. Do you want to start at Kingston?
yeah, let's start on this end
Okay.
because that way I've got my notes on the side just so in case I
Yeah,
forget.
go for it.
So yeah, so this one is southwest of the Canberra CBD.
Hmm.
Things I like about this deal. So vacancies are really large. So this is just like a little retail shop that's under a block of apartments, but it doesn't have lots of foot traffic because it's typically in kind of suburbia in Kingston. However, it's on the corner of a major intersection, and you actually see in that first photo, you've actually, even though they're not utilizing it, they've actually got the premise to have like an alfresco area out the front,
Mm.
which is, you can click the first photo if you really want.
Oh, yep.
And you can just see there. So you got the alfresco, which lends itself to, okay, this potentially down the track could be a cafe or something like that, or have
Yep.
some form of outdoor area. At the moment, it's an injectables, it's cosmetic injectables on a decent lease and a nice tidy yield as well. So we're actually getting, I think it was about 6.1% yield.
Mm.
Oh, sorry, 6.25%, 900 grand purchase price, and you're getting 56,200 net rent coming
Mm.
in on the actual deal. So the negative with these ones is vacancy periods can be really, really long, but the reason we're going to mitigate that on this one is it's got the alfresco, it's got lots of road exposure, and the benefit of something like this retail is once you get the right tenant, they're typically there on average 5 to 12 years, and then you'll have a vacancy period of generally 6 to 12 months. Again, you've got to cross-check all this as part of due diligence. So on the whole, for this type of area where the apartments are selling for a similar value, we saw some good value, good yield, good road exposure, and we're like, okay, let's look into this deal a little bit further. Fairly new building, I think it was 2005. So we could actually get some good depreciation on it as well.
Yeah. Low.
Everything seemed to stack up, and the client wanted it, so we actually went under contract on this one.
Mm.
That's it. Do we want to leave maybe the viewers to kind of have a mull that over? I'm just trying to be conscious of time that we'll maybe spend five or
No,
six
like, I
minutes.
mean, do you want me to scroll through any of this? Do you want to talk through
Yeah,
any?
you can maybe just go through. So like high level, when we first look at a deal and present a deal,
Yeah.
you go over things like who the tenant is, how long the lease is. Obviously look at all the cash flow on the property. So if you
Yeah.
go down to the cash flow, you can see, click that. We do it at varying interest rates. So you can see we actually do 5.5% on the left-hand side up to 7.5%. We
And
typically
different
choose,
LVR.
yeah, we typically choose like 1 to 2% varying from what the current rate is.
Hmm.
That's obviously important because everyone says, oh, rates are going to go down. Who knows? Like the banks can't even get it right. So let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So at the moment, lease stock loans are around 6.5%. A lease stock loan is a loan based on the premises of a lease. So if you get a good 3-year lease, you get a lease stock loan based on that. But this is part of the power of commercial, I want to point out. So if you go across to the right-hand side, you can see, you mentioned we've
Oh,
got
sorry, as
different,
in look on the right-hand side
yeah,
of this. Yep.
yeah. You can see that the loan to value ratio, that's because most people are actually pulling equity from a residential or another
Yeah.
property to buy their commercial because not many people can come up with a 30% deposit, hence why there's 100 and 105% loans. But the powerful thing for me is you're buying $1 million property. Let's just say 70% loan, so you're using cash at
Hmm.
6.5%, which is the current interest rate. We are seeing 6.1, 6.2 for lease stock at the moment, and even sub 5.9s for full doc.
Hmm.
You're literally 17 grand a year cash flow positive in your pocket. And then when people say, oh, commercial's risky, what if the tenant leaves at the end of the 3-year lease? I'm up $55,000.
Yeah. That's
So
a pretty good.
I've got
That's a pretty good
55 grand.
vacancy.
Yeah, that's right. So the mortgage repayments are interest only, it's 40 grand. So I can actually survive over a year before I have to dip into my own pocket.
Mm.
And comparing that with residential, if I go out and buy $1 million house in, let's say, Sydney's West, that's going to be negative around 15 grand a year, minimum negative 15 grand a year. Over 3 years, I'm now 45 grand in the hole.
Yeah.
So one property I'm 50 grand up, the other one I'm close to 50 grand in the hole. So there's circa 100 grand difference in my pocket. So theoretically, at the end of the 3 years, I've got an extra $100,000 I did compared to buying a residential. Which again, if you got 40s, that's now 2.5 years I've got for this property to sit vacant before I'm in a worse cash flow position compared to a residential.
Yeah.
And I find when I explain it to that people, they chill out a little bit because in the moment of a vacancy, it feels like a lot. But if you prepare these buffers in place, I'd actually argue it's lower risk,
Mm.
assuming you're buying stuff with less than 3 year vacancy rates, of course,
Yeah.
that holding a commercial is much easier long term if you have the buffers. But for residential, the buffers are much smaller because it's like, oh, I got a budget in case the air conditioning goes or the hot water system.
Mhm.
This one is you don't have those expenses, but you've got the vacancy you need to prepare for. But
Yeah.
like I said, this one, little cheapy, less than $1 million, still a good yield. We do some high level checks at the start when we're presenting. We found when we presented too much information, people get paralysis analysis.
Yep.
So we just give some high level and then gauge if they're interested and go, okay, look, are you actually, is it worth going to the pointy end of negotiations on this and then get it under contract subject to due diligence,
Mhm.
which is a big leap of faith. People saying, I've looked at some slight comparables, the lease, no idea about the tenant, what the terms are, blah, blah, blah. And then you go under contract. We do all obviously the stuff and just like area analysis, check flood zones, zonings, all the big ticket stuff that we would have crashed on initially.
Mhm.
But then you've got the leap of faith, and then that's when you find out if it's a deal or no deal.
So, Stephen, keen to understand with that. Obviously, we'd say hotspotting 80% of your success is going to come from where you buy more so than what you buy. Would you say that you'd change that figure to go the other direction in commercial? Because I'm looking at this address and I know Kingston and the ACT, but in terms of where I'd be putting my money in residential, I don't know that I'd tick the boxes for me personally. But it's very different when I'm looking at the property, and I'd have to account for the property itself to be doing a lot more than 20% of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, so really, really, really good question. I'm going to answer it in two parts. Typically for industrial, yes, the area is crucial because that is what services the local economy,
Yeah,
i.e., like the mechanics and the wholesalers and the fabricators and just like the kitchen suppliers and the
yeah,
tradies and all that type of stuff. So part of that is if you get the residential area right, that will naturally lift the commercial property anyway, because
hmm,
you don't have $1 million house and $1 million warehouse, and the resi goes to 2 million, and the warehouse sits at 1 million. So you can actually get some fake, like basically lifting the floor of the property
yeah,
without the other stuff. Part of commercial though, so that's called yield compression.
hmm,
Part of it, other one comes from rental increases.
yeah,
So if that property is in demand and the rents say grow by 50% over the next 5, 7 years, automatically you get 50% capital growth, even if the residential area doesn't perform.
yeah,
So that's the benefit of commercial, and also the negative
hmm,
is you need those rental increases. They typically happen out of sync as well, which confuses most people because you've seen most of the areas in the last 3 years, pretty much every major resi area has boomed.
yeah,
Commercial lagged by about 3 years because all the 3, 4, 5 year leases have to come to fruition because they're all on basically 3 to 4, 5% rental increases,
yeah.
and we saw 7 to 8%. So that comes, and then it comes a bit later.
Yeah, I think
For
there's
retail,
certainly been a better sentiment around commercial amongst everyday investors as well, and not the ones that have necessarily always been as astute. And surely, those higher interest rate periods in residential catching up to commercial brought commercial in line with it to an extent.
yeah, funny enough, in historically in the last 30 years, commercial typically followed the cycles by 3 to 5 years, which is
Yep.
where the myth came from that they don't grow because the
Mm.
residential will grow and people go, oh, look, commercial's still sitting there. But then when residential's sitting there doing nothing, the commercial was growing, but no one at the time up until about 7 years ago even looked at commercial.
Mm.
Like it wasn't a thing. Like my book 5 years ago was the first book in the market. Now there's 4 books, there's 3 or 4 other people
Yeah.
doing podcast series. Like we've gone from a people like probably 10,000 people in Australia looking at commercial to now hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
So now there's a bit more, and that's what beefed it up this time. So they actually went pretty much in parallel. They both grew together.
Yeah.
The second part of that question is retail is completely different.
Yeah.
So I can buy retail in an area where I don't think the residential is going to boom. I don't want it to be obviously like the population going down and they have no economy and stuff like that. But like Canberra is a pretty well structured area,
Yeah.
hence why retail.
Very diverse. Yeah.
You also get a way better bang for buck. So
Mm.
you go buy retail, for instance, we typically buy between 6 and 7% net yields for retail in Canberra.
Hmm.
However, with industrial, you're lucky if you get 5.5.
Yeah.
So so that's 1% extra yield on that property. So all of a sudden, we need minimum an extra 1% capital growth just to break even with that. Then you start talking bang for buck. You go, okay, for sub mil, I can get a way better asset class than buying a $2 million. The same arguments for Sydney, for instance. Like
Mm.
you go buy this retail in Sydney, you're talking probably 1.5, $2 million
Yeah,
and
that's
a lower
true.
yield. So it's balancing that. But it's actually a really good question, and that's the main risk you need to take when you're looking at retail. Most people aren't buying Westfield retail, so
No,
don't
that's right.
when I say that. People go, "Oh, retail spending's down." I'm like, "Yeah, we're not buying a Westfields here. We're
Yeah.
buying like a hair salon, a cafe, a
Going
barber
to a
shop." Like,
country town with an IGA and they're pumping.
yeah, weirdly, I actually was on a podcast yesterday, and this is a bit of a side topic, and they were talking about AI and how it's going to wipe out the middle class. And I was like, cool, that's also exactly why I'm buying suburban retail because you can wipe out people's computers and get them off work. They will still need to physically go places for food, haircuts,
Mm.
tattoos, blah, 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 blah. So the in-person stuff I actually really like.
Mm.
So my recent purchase was a little shopping center for myself for 3 mil that had 8 tenants,
Yep.
stuff like that can go on. But coming back to the answer, foot traffic, road traffic for retail and vacancy is paramount.
Mm.
It's also the hardest one to analyze as well
Okay.
because, like, if you go 2 streets away from this and you find a vacant shop, that actually has nothing to do with this one because this one might have more road exposure or less.
Hmm.
So it's always going to come down to exactly that asset and what you
And
like.
unique
But
qualities as well.
yeah, but when we present this, we'll actually do the vacancy study and we'll probably show um, what the vacancy, I don't want to give it away, but what the vacancy is. Sometimes surprisingly, like my little shopping center, sub 6 months. In the last 10 years, there's only been 2 vacancies out of the 8 shops, and they're both less than 6 months. Other ones you find that's 6 to 12 months. In a bad area, you're talking 1, 2, 3 years, and then that's something you walk away from.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, to summarize this one, purchase price 900,000, medical retail, you would call that, and that's giving you a 6.25% net rental yield. So that one was a deal.
Was it a deal or was it not a
Oh,
deal?
was it not? I thought you said it. I thought you gave it away. We haven't
No, I
given it
said I
away
did.
yet. All right. Well, if
I
that's the
didn't want to give it
case,
away.
I thought you did. I thought you. I must have misheard you. Well, if that's the case, then let's launch the poll and see what everybody thinks.
Although now
Oh,
I've given it away.
here we go. Everyone's going with a deal because they think I'm giving it away. I could be tricking everybody instead. All right. All right. We are ending the poll, and the results are we have got 73% of people think it's a deal, and 27% say no deal. So over to you, Steve. What was it?
No
No
deal.
deal. Hey.
Fundamentally, we actually went under contract on this one,
Mhm.
and
That's what I
everything
thought I heard you
sat.
say before, so I just assumed it was a deal.
Yeah, but under contract, we actually crushed 1 in 5 of our deals that we go under contract.
Yeah, right.
That's because what happens with commercial is the agent won't give you. We get literally about 100 files
Yep.
for due diligence. Like we've literally got a Dropbox just with subfolders and subfolders. They don't give you that up front because can you imagine them sending out like P&L statements and
Yeah.
rental ledgers and people's private information to thousands of buyers? The only time they do that is if it's an auction, and
Hmm.
that's typically like more blue chip type ones. So you have to take that leap of faith, go under contract, and then go through everything. Surprisingly, everything stacked up quite well with this. Vacancies we actually found were typically about 6 months, and
Hmm.
average tenancy period was 5 to 7 years. Only reason we actually crushed this one was actually a finance issue. The current tenant that was there was actually subleasing to another tenant. So the
Hmm.
people that were actually in the building weren't actually on the lease. So someone had obviously like
Yeah.
had a business there in the past. It didn't actually work out. So they've subleased it to a family friend or whatever it is,
Mm.
but there was no actual contractual obligation from the tenant. So it's effectively illegally there
Mm.
operating. The issue with that is can't get finance for like a lease stock loan or anything like that because the person who's in there isn't on actual lease.
Yeah.
And then we crashed
That can
because it
affect
was,
refinance, all sorts of things. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Mm.
just it's like risk and insurance and all that type of stuff. You've effectively got a non-approved person in the
Yeah.
space, and the lease for retail, the lease isn't registered as well to the
Yep.
correct person. However, some of those you actually would have proceeded on. You would have spoken to the tenant saying, "Hey, we need to transfer this lease over to the new tenant," and you just extend settlement and things like that. But that wasn't possible due to the time frame, so we actually just crashed the deal. But on the whole, deal stacked up. Just the tenant,
Interesting.
a legal slash lease issue was the reason we crashed the deal. Which is you never get this with residential. Like
No, that's right.
residential, if the tenant's, I don't know, not paid rent for a week or two, you don't probably not proceed. You just kind of move on and worry about the actual property itself. Because, like you said, the location does most of the heavy lifting.
That's it. All right. Well, let's head over to Cranbrook in Queensland. What can you tell us about this duplex?
All
You're
right.
on a
So,
resi.
yeah, so I chose this one specifically because every second buyer's agent, as you know, Tim, is loving Townsville. And
Yeah.
obviously, since the floods and that, they've gone off. But the suburb that most were looking at was Kerwin, if you know
Yeah.
that suburb. Like
Yep.
every second buyer's agent seemed to be buying in Kerwin, which I actually argue is a bit of a false flaw. You've
Mhm.
got hundreds of people buying there because their buyer's agents are telling you there. So
Yep.
this is a suburb next to it. This is for a client though that didn't actually have a huge budget,
Hmm.
but they wanted a good yield. So typically, if you go like in a major regional area and get a duplex,
Yep.
you can actually just get a decent yield. I think let me pull it up. It was about 5.25%.
We've got
Yeah, 5 point,
5.23
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Yep.
percent yield, which is not bad in this market considering most capital cities. You're
Hmm.
talking like if you bought a single property there, you have high fours. If you buy
Yep.
a capital city, you're kind of low fours to high threes. But again, everything kind of stacked up. It goes a good yield. The kitchen and fit outs were all perfect.
Uh,
Um, Not a bad area in regards to Townsville for price and things like that. Yeah, we actually didn't mind the deal. A bit under rented as well. And for sub 700K, getting two properties, two tenants, fresh fit outs, it looked all clean and tidy. As you can imagine with residential, because you've chosen the area does typically the heavy lifting. Guess what's the thing that's normally going to crush a deal for residential? Building and pest.
building in pest. And also, you're talking gross yield there. And I know certainly in that part of Queensland, you're paying a few insurance premiums there as well, which is going to
Yeah,
make your
that's a
net
good
very
point.
different.
So insurance is typically like 3 to 5 grand in those areas.
Mm.
I've actually done, oh, no, that's incorrect on this one. Yeah, it's 3 to 5 grand, but I've done more rates in those,
Yep.
which is we're got to be mindful of that, surprisingly. So my partner is actually an insurance broker.
Hmm.
So she used to do reinsurance, which is like the insurance companies that insure insurance companies.
Yep.
Most people don't understand reinsurance, but basically it means,
No, is that like an underwriter?
yeah, so it's an underwriter. But now she does insurance brokering, which is like for like commercial property and
Yep.
stuff like that. But prior to that, it's for like if you go to get like, let's say Woolworths insurance, building insurance, they obviously, if there's a major flood or fire or something like that, flood comes through and wipes out, I don't know, 100 houses, they don't have the money to replace the 100 houses. So they actually take out insurance against extreme events.
Yep.
So there's an insurance for an insurance agency. Because of that background of reinsurance, most insurers are starting to walk away, if not just pump the premiums for
Yeah.
flood. So be very mindful buying residential in flood areas. There's also a conversation about obviously global warming, which we won't get into as
Yep.
well, that it might actually get worse. But insurers are walking away. So don't think that if you're getting a 5 grand insurance premium for your Townsville flood, that it's not going to increase in the coming years because it will.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, but we won't spend too long, I think, on the resi ones because
Yeah.
99% of your listeners understand resi, and it's basically a house in an area with a decent yield, clean and tidy fit out.
We'll have a quick.
You can see the cash flow. I've actually realized the cash flow is wrong there because it's got the typical building insurance because I rushed it last night.
That's okay.
However, um, yeah, but again, actually worth showing that. So remember before we did 6.5%. It's got 80% here, not 70% because of commercial. But you can just see like this is a cheaper property. It's like a 700K-ish property. and we're 10 grand a year negative
Mm.
at the thing. And that's not including like the big ticket maintenance items and stuff like that. So you can actually see in the top right, I've left repairs off
Mhm.
because we actually fill that out once we've done the build and pest inspection, which I've kind of alluded to. If I don't have these numbers to present to you,
Mhm.
what's happened with this deal?
Yeah. So do you want to go straight to the
No,
deal or
I
no
think
deal?
I think I think we'll save it for the commercial because it's a bit funner. Because the resi one, like, unless they've seen the report, which I could have brought up, but
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not really adding too much value to your listeners who already understand and follow you guys.
Yeah.
This one, everything again seemed to be squeaky clean until we actually found timber rot from a leaking roof, and it was about an $80,000 fix. And it was
Yeah.
just like,
Wow.
nah, not worth. Try to negotiate the price because I always see whenever I see an issue, I see it as an opportunity. Most investors walk away,
Mm.
but if I see something that's got $80,000 that needs fixing, and I can get, typically I try to add at least 50% to it.
Hmm.
If I can get $120,000 off the purchase price,
Yeah.
I'm then open to exploring these opportunities because 40 grand is 40 grand. Like, it's a nice
Well,
little,
look at the other thing is you've got a most likely a very motivated vendor as well because they're probably aware of it.
yeah. And once they've found it as well,
Mm.
typically they're supposed to disclose it. They
Yeah.
don't always do
Yeah.
it, as you know, but then they're aware of it. But they weren't because we were the first buyer on this one because we got this one off market and
Mm.
they didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
So, but again, it was just something where literally walls had to come out and it was just a big deal, which was surprising because as you can see in the photos, the kitchens and the bathrooms were actually clean and tidy.
Yeah.
Like,
Presenting.
so I was like, oh, they've renovated this. My guess is behind the scenes they've actually done it to mask
Mm.
things, but luckily they've actually found through the moisture meter that there was some moisture, and then they found the timber rot that way.
Yeah.
Um, that's actually a good point. Takeaway is never cheap out on a building and pest inspection.
Yeah.
I always get clients that go, "Oh, King, do you have someone cheaper?" And I'm like, "No, I'm spending the expensive guy
Yeah.
because he goes through it with a fine tooth comb. He's got his thermal imaging camera, he's got his moisture meter. Our guy's even got a drone with a high def camera that he
Mm.
flies over the roof, inspecting the gutters and cracked roof tiles and all that type of stuff. Like, why would you
Yeah.
sacrifice a couple
We've
$100
We've
for
we've
something
bought
like this?
properties that we found terrible things on building and pests, and when the vendors found out about it, they said, "Why wasn't it picked up on my building and pest when I bought the property 3 years ago?"
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. So, and it's the takeaway is just like it just baffles me when someone's like, "Oh no, I don't want to pay. They're expensive. They're $200 too much."
Mm.
This is literally $200 to save this client $80,000.
Yeah,
Like, it's a definitely consider it an insurance problem. Like,
yeah,
you're getting insurance for flood, you're getting building insurance. Don't
yeah,
just go to the guys that have the tick box forms of like satisfactory, satisfactory. So
yeah,
no, make sure they go through it. 1,000 photos, recordings of things, go through everything, fine tooth comb.
yeah. That's it. All right, so we know what that one was. Then we'll move on
Yeah.
to Crowley Street in Port Kennedy.
Hmm. All
Okay,
right.
so we've
So,
got industrial.
yep, I actually like this area quite a lot. So this
Mhm.
is down south in kind of near Rockingham,
Oh,
down
yep.
south of. This one's really, actually, I'll pull up my one so I can see. Yeah, so it's just an entire shed with a fabricator tenant, which suits the area. But Port Kennedy and Rockingham actually have quite a lot going on. They're extending the port. They're spending. I've got in
Mm.
the notes there. You're scrolling down. They're like,
Yeah.
what's going on there? There's quite a lot going there. Just let me pull up my ones just so I can see the price and stuff as well. Do, 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 do. Where is it? All right, so this one was $1 million. The kicker for this one is it's around a 7% 0.2 net yield on paper. So like this was like, okay, this is a cracker deal. And this is part of the benefit is you go buy this equivalent property and say, let's say you go buy it in Perth, you're getting 5.5 to 6% net yield. But
Hmm.
by going south, slightly higher vacancy rates. So a vacancy on something like this in Perth would literally be 1 to 4 months.
Hmm.
Something like down south here, talking probably 3 months to 6 months. So a bit more vacancy, but as you can see, you're getting 20% more rent from this property.
Hmm.
But what I like about this one, freestanding, already got a tenant on a fresh 3-year lease. 5% rental increases, good tenant, value add as well. It's on a good sized lot in a good industrial complex that we've bought before. But you also, for $1 million, you're getting the 72 grand income,
Mm.
which is just ridiculous. So on paper again, hence why we've spent the time writing this property up, sent it to the client. We went under contract on it and then had to do some bigger digging deeper there. What's some points here? We buy quite a lot in Perth, just for your information,
Hmm.
probably around 10 a month. And we
Hmm.
also buy the other kind of areas we buy industrial at the moment are Sydney, Brisbane, sometimes in Canberra as well. But
Yep.
again, like I mentioned, there's a sharp yield there. You're talking kind of 5%. Benefit of buying in, say, somewhere like ACT is no stamp duty,
Mm.
which is a nice big chunk of change. You go buy this, you're saving kind of 35 grand up front.
Hmm.
But on a $1 million property, when you instead of getting a 7% yield, you're getting a 5% yield, you're actually losing out on the cash flow. So you can make it back that
Mm.
way. So there's that kind of balancing act there. We also buy in more regional parts of Australia. However, this is just a general rule. I'm going to say it for industrial.
Mhm.
Buying in an industrial in a regional area, you can have tight vacancy rates, but on average, vacancy rates are higher because there's more land. So if you go buying that is like there's grassland and fields, as eyes can see, that can be oversupplied very easily. There's also not the same demand. But again, take that with a grain of salt because it depends where you're buying. If you're buying the heart of a kind of regional town, you can do all right. If we're buying regionally, I normally go for an X factor. So like an example would be what's one we bought recently? Okay, we bought in Burnie in Tasmania,
Yeah, we love
which
it. Yep.
yep, population growth isn't huge there. It's actually been
Mhm.
the same for the last like 7 years. However, for $1 million, you can get multi-tenancy
Mm.
freestanding. So you can start going, oh, what's actually better? Getting 3 or 4 tenants freestanding in an area that we're not as convinced about, whereas this one that's got some good growth factors, but a good yield. And this is the hard thing with commercial is everyone values something different.
Mm.
Some people are yield driven, they just want to chase a high yield. Other ones want the capital growth as well. So therefore, it's got to be in a good area, like you mentioned, with good
Mhm.
fundamentals, residential. Some people want value add. Some people just want a long lease and not have to worry about the property for 5, 7 years. And then there's a combination of all these. Some want multi-tenancy and things like that. And that's the hardest thing because there's no definition of what a good property is.
Mm.
Residential is very easy. What you bought, did it grow in value?
Mm.
And then you can compare apples and apples by saying,
Yeah,
well,
you just call it good real estate.
yeah, well, it's very easy calculation. It's like return on investment. You go,
Yeah.
okay, I'll take in the cash flow and I'll take in the capital growth and let's combine them there. You can sort of do that with commercial. However, it's got to come down to what your actual, like what your purpose of buying that property is.
Mm.
So an example would be we get clients that all the time where we want to build a passive income for retirement. I could buy them in the best growth area in the world. And I can
Mm.
buy like let's say north of Sydney. So in that kind of whole north of Chatswood up to Brookvale, all those types of areas there. It's a 0% vacancy rate. I'll
Mm.
say that again. 0% vacancy industrial rate in north of Sydney.
Mm.
However, you're buying stuff between a 4 and a 5% yield. So if I can all of a sudden spend the same money, like warehouses there are typically 3, 4 million, I can go spend 3 or 4 million and go out to a regional area like a Townsville
Mhm.
and buy an entire retail strip with 10 tenants and get a 7% net yield.
Mm.
So I'm getting quite a large chunk. I'm getting more than
Yeah.
50% rent from that. So that client doesn't care about the capital growth. If it's club 30-year-old and I know they're going to be working for the next 10 years, cool. Let's get the one with capital growth because you won't get into the next property through cash
Without
flow
it.
quickly.
Yeah,
If
that's
you
right.
get the cash flow and the capital growth, that's how you start accumulating. So the
Mm.
different phases of your portfolio are really critical.
That's it. All
All
right.
right.
So, shall we go to the question? Anything else you want to cover on this one before we do?
No, this is just a good one that this client wanted freestanding, which arguably, actually, let's touch on that. I get a lot of people that come to me with smaller budgets and they say, I want freestanding. And then I ask why. And they go, oh, I want it because it's value add. In reality, 99% of my buyers don't end up doing the value add because if
Mm.
I do my job and I've always got a tenant, what are they actually going to do with the actual land in
Mm.
itself? The negative, even though the tenants cover the outgoings in commercials, they pay maintenance, insurance, water rates, council rates, all that stuff. In reality, if like say this roof started leaking dramatically, even though on paper the tenant's responsible, they're going to come back and say, hey, your roof's faulty, can you fix it?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're going to be up for 50 grand, 80 grand. So all of a sudden you need a buffer like residential for a freestanding. However, if I bought this same property and spent $1 million in a body corporate complex, not only will I get a bigger premise because it's like the same money, but it's in a body corporate. So I get a bigger floor space, probably get a newer building. This one's a tin shed. I'll get concrete, tilt up panels, roller doors, newer, good, better depreciation, better quality tenant, etc. However, I've got an admin and sinking fund from the body corporate to back up
Mm,
maintenance. So if you
mm,
do a body corporate report and you find, okay, there's 200 grand in the sinking fund,
yeah.
it's another insurance policy almost for you.
Mm.
So there's always a pro and a con. I personally own freestanding and I own body corporates, but don't shy away from body corporate kind of warehouses. Most of the time, they've actually got lower vacancies because the
Mm.
tenants want to be in a complex
I
with
think,
other businesses.
especially, it's probably a good point for anybody who's sort of coming from the residential space. And, I find in the residential, people have had a fear around body corporates for a long time because of they've thought about the apartment complexes with the, massive body corporate fees and that keep on going up and up and up. But a lot of people don't understand body corporates. And I think in commercial, it's definitely got its pros more than it does its cons. Whereas in a lot of residential, it's money that you sort of constantly chipping away as a landlord, having to pay, and you're not even getting the benefits of half of the amenities.
That's a good point, actually. So most people get fearful because they think of like apartment blocks and stuff like that. I'm actually personally not against townhouses because you still own the significant land
Land
component. The reason
component, yeah.
I like apartments is they can build, there's infinite sky space. But a
Mm,
townhouse, you've got your courtyard, you got your driveway, you got your garage. The negative is obviously can't do a value add
mm,
because your value add is internal renovation. That's
mm.
it. Whereas with a freestanding house, you can add rooms, you can pretty it up, you can
Yeah,
knock
that's
it
it.
down, rebuild, you can build second dwellings, granny flats, yada yada yada, which normal people do.
Yeah.
However, I actually just sold. I owned a property in Waterford West in Brisbane, a townhouse. It was my number, I think number 5 or 6 property in my portfolio. Bought it for 180 grand. I just sold it for 470,000
Mm,
6 years later. So when people say you can't do well from townhouses,
mhm.
yes, you can still do well. And funny enough, that property didn't spend a cent on it. Had the
Yeah.
same tenant for the whole time, didn't touch it. Nice little cheapie, like for 180 grand. So, but again, I can't be oversupplied in that area because it's still got the land component.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to avoid it if you can, but if at the time I was a struggling engineer, that's what I could afford.
Fair enough. All right. So, circling back to the top here, we have an industrial property on 1,800 square meters, 1,623 square meter building. What was it? Getting
7.2% net yield, which is a
7.2%. Why don't we
cracking
go?
yield. Don't sign up to my services thinking you're going to get that all day every day. This is a proper cracking deal.
All right. Well, let's launch the poll. What was it? Was it a deal or a no deal? Maybe Steve's talking, but he might be trying to sway you. I don't know. Give it a couple more seconds. All right. I think you've done a pretty convincing job there, Steve. It is 93% of people are saying that it is a deal.
No deal.
No deal. No way. You had me going as well. All
Yeah.
right. Where did all
So
this fall
again,
over?
everything stacked up, and I personally, hand on heart, would have bought this property if it wasn't for this. But the reason I chose this one, I want to show you how obscure some of the reasons get of why you might actually crush a deal.
Mhm.
What most buyers agents and most commercial people don't know, we actually do credit history checks on tenants.
Mhm.
And to be honest, even the owner, the previous owner as well. And you can do this. We just pay. We don't even charge our client. We just do it ourselves because we want it. We actually found that this tenant had a 300 grand unpaid tax debt on the
Mm.
property.
Yeah.
So we knew, we're like, they're not going to keep paying rent. So we're,
Mm.
we're buying with this good 3 year
Something's got to
lease.
give.
It means nothing. They're going to pay their tax debt before they pay the rent.
Yep.
So even though on paper it looked all right, behind the scenes we knew they were going to be a struggling business. Not always a
Mm.
reason to walk away from a deal because
Yeah.
sometimes actually booting the tenant and getting a new one in. If this was in like a Sydney or a Brisbane kind of CBD area,
Yep.
probably would have still proceeded, but we would have been very mindful of rental payments. And as soon
Mm.
as they missed one, put a breach in, give them their 60, 90 days, kick him out, get a new tenant, knowing him. But because it is Port Kennedy and it's a bit more regional and we're buying it based on getting that fabricator tenant, they're there and there's a longer vacancy, we didn't want to buy a property for a client that literally in 6 months' time they have problems with. They've
Yeah.
got to go through 2 or 3 months of kicking a tenant out, then another 6 months. All of a sudden, it looks like we're not doing our job. And we
Yeah.
did do our job, and we found something we didn't like. We presented it. We said, "This is the pros. This is the cons of going ahead with this."
Mhm.
We decided to crash it, and we started looking again.
There you go. Well, that's a level of due diligence that I haven't seen before. I wouldn't have thought to do that.
No one else does it. We actually do it. We request P&L statements, rental ledgers, and we do a credit history check on anyone we can find. Directors of the
Yeah.
owners,
Yeah.
the tenant, everything. We even Google stalk people as much as we can.
Yeah, right. Look, just remind me never to get on the wrong side of you, eh?
It's you can do it on anyone though. That's
Yeah.
that's the scary part.
All right.
Don't worry, Tim. I know about your tax debt.
Ah, no. All right, so we are running out of time. We've got 20 minutes left, and we want to get some Q&A in. So let's jump into Richlands. What do we got here? We've got another industrial, net lettable area of 256 square meters, office slash warehouse.
Yep. So I really like this area. So it's kind of like halfway between like Ipswich and Brisbane.
Yep.
Good. Look, this is just what you call a typical entry level tick the box property, i.e., it's just like clean, tidy, concrete, versatile, in a complex, affordable as well. So
Yep.
this property, I think from memory, it was about 930. There we go, 930. Yep. 930 grand. Nothing special about this property, just good tenant, good location, tight vacancy rates, fairly new, slightly under rented as well, which is always a
Mhm.
positive. So like I think we got it was about a 5.38% yield for buying, but the rent was under a little bit, so it'll actually be closer to 6 when you bump the rent up. But again, just good 930K. This is what we call like a typical get into the market, weigh your appetite with commercial. It all looks clean, tidy. We've actually bought in this kind of area before, so we know due diligence stacks up, sub 4 month vacancy rates, good area, completely surrounded by residential.
Mhm.
Just a good tick the box. We normally buy 10, 15 of those every single month.
Yeah, wow.
All right. Do we want to do deal or no deal? I won't go into too much because
Yeah,
I'm
no, that's
time.
well worth it. So let me go back. We'll get this one going. All right. Yeah, Steve, you haven't just come along and given us 6 or 7 properties that are all no deals just to mess with us, have you? Steve, you haven't just given us brought along 7 no deals tonight just to mess with me, have you?
Who knows?
Well, 79%. You've got a couple of people that are questioning you now. 21% said no deal and 79% deal. So where were we on this one?
No deal.
Oh, he's done it to us again. All right.
You're starting to see a pattern now, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
All right, so
God.
the reason we crashed this one, again, we're bought in this area, we know it's really good. When we did the body corporate report, and this is why it's really important, like you don't have this issue with residential ever.
Yep.
We like went through the hundreds of pages to find out what's going on. And we actually found a thing that we mentioned about undersupplied electrical cabling. And we're like, that's a bit strange. So most of the units, well, all the units in this complex had 64 amps
Mhm.
power.
Yep.
But they actually found the cables couldn't handle every property having 64 amps. So in theory, like normally you'd only have 1 or 2 tenants potentially having the 64 amps. So it wasn't overloaded. But in practice, if every tenant had 64 amps, it wouldn't actually be able to supply. So
Mm.
basically what we found was they're reducing everyone's power output to 32 amps maximum. The current tenant in this one actually needed 64 amps, and this actually caused disaster. We actually told them that we found this, and they're like, "What? We're not going to be able to operate our property here anymore."
Mm.
So they're actually reducing it. The issue with that is future lettability as well. It all of a sudden takes off any types of manufacturing tenants
Mm.
and would just be limited to like e-commerce type businesses, anyone that's not using plant and machinery. So again,
Yeah.
it's
It's
not a
interesting
bad
when,
deal.
when you're thinking about it in residential terms, when we're thinking about when we purchasing a property that we're going to lease out or we're going to resell, we always have to be thinking about who's going to occupy it and who's going to buy it off us later. And for a lot of the time in my career, I've had people that have been targeting these dual occupancies and duplexes and everything that are trying to get that higher cash flow. And I've always said, you do have to think about who's going to buy this off you at a premium later. And if you've got a market where there's not a lot of investors in and you need to sell, and there's no owner occupiers coming on to buy that property, you could be in strife. So I really get the sentiment here that you've got to think about who the likelihood of what the likelihood of different types of tenancies are going to be. And if they can't rent the place because they can't get the right electricity, you're in that certain creek without a paddle.
Yeah, and so this one, like, we would have proceeded if we got a better yield. And that's the thing, because I wouldn't be against it, But because this was all happening at the same time, all of a sudden there's going to be two or three vacancies pop up in that property. If
Yeah.
this was already existing, they'd already done it, we were 1 or 2 years down the track, we might have proceeded, but we probably would have wanted a sharper yield
Mhm.
because we were paying a premium to get this deal because it's a good location. But it didn't have that versatility. So you'd probably want to get closer to the 6% in Brisbane for this. So it's one of those ones. We tried to get a price negotiation. They said no. Cool. I always let the client know we can do better than this. Let's
Yeah.
move on. And weirdly, whenever we tell a client to crash a deal, the first reaction is like FOMO, like they oh we've already put a little bit of, then they actually you can see them processing being like, okay, Steve's just told me he doesn't want to receive a commission. That's a good sign. And then they trust you wholeheartedly on the next one.
Yeah.
My ethos is always if I get them a good deal now, they're definitely going to come back and buy the second, third, fourth
Yeah.
commercial through me.
No, that's a good one. Listen, I've skipped over the Norlane Resi because I think people are going to
Yeah.
get a lot more value out of these commercial ones for tonight. We're running out of time. So let's jump into South Red O'Connor, Showroom Industrial. Talk to me.
Yep. All right, so this is WA. I actually personally love these types of ones. So I call them like industrial retail. So you know,
Hmm.
like the retail showroom type ones.
Yep.
The reason I like retail showrooms is you actually get multiple types of tenants because you can configure it to be 90% industrial and just have like a little desk at the front, kind of like like Reese Plumbing and stuff like
Yeah.
that, where you walk in, the front counter's there, and then it's all just stock
Yeah.
behind. Or it can be an entire showroom. So something like this is a supplement store where you walk through and it's an actual retail shop. So as the word I keep mentioning, versatility, you've got a huge versatility. Like I personally, my next purchase, I'm looking to buy like an entire like retail showroom type complex
Hmm.
because I just love the versatility.
Mm.
Um, this one again, we've bought in this area before. Really good area, fairly new, clean and tidy. Tenant looked all right as well. I'm as a gym goer. I go into supplement stores and stuff like that as well. Good, decent price, 900K, close to a 6% net yield,
Hmm.
which is a fairly sharp yield for what we're getting. Everything seemed to stack up. We actually crashed this one literally a day undergo. I just told you the answer.
I
A
got
day,
that
yeah, a day under. So no deal, guys.
one.
I'm going to be very careful with my words here. So once we went on to contract, our DD team started doing digging on the tenants, the tenant, the owner of the business, the owner of the property, all that type of stuff. I'm going to be conscious here of what I'm going to say. We actually found that
Mhm.
the owner of the business, when we did some credit history checks, was the gang leader of a bikie group that had assault charges and allegedly drug and some convictions and blah 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 blah, allegedly. However, as soon as we found this from doing those kind of checks, we went to our client and said, "Hey, look, if this was me, I would not want to own this property. I think
Mm.
you're playing with danger with an owner that's got all this other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Let's move on."
Yeah.
So we crashed this for you would never get this in residential, like ever.
It might not have
Um,
been supplements that were getting sold in there either.
it's just the like funnily enough, like insurers, and this is a bit of a side topic. So insurers don't like supplement stores because they actually, for that exact reason, money gets washed through their illegal
Mm,
activity. The same reason they don't like vape shops.
mm,
So your insurance premium for something like this is actually quite high because they know the risk of firebombing, illegal activity. Insurers don't want to have to do anything with illegal activity.
mm.
Um, and again, I'm not saying that anything untoward's going on in this business. However, a quick Google of that, we actually weirdly we just saw his name. We just typed in his name on Google,
Mm.
and then all of a sudden the news feeds came up, and we're like, okay, let's let this one go. I think.
Okay, well, we've got time for one more, so let's
Is
dive
it going to be a
into.
deal or no deal?
Is
This
it going to be
is.
a deal or no deal? I reckon we've got this one, team.
Right.
Okay, so industrial versatile layout complex constructed in 2010. What
Mhm.
have we got here?
Yep. So we're bought here. This is similar to like the Richlands one. So kind of
Yep.
like a halfway between Ipswich and Brisbane. Again, just a really clean and tidy industrial property. We got this one for 930 grand, so another sub mil.
Hmm.
The yield though is 4.79%, which is actually incredibly
Really
low.
strong here. Yep.
Like the rent is way under. The rent actually
Mm.
needs to be up literally around the $60,000 mark, which would actually bring this to closer to, actually, I'll give you the exact number, 6.4% net yield.
Yeah.
Um, However, that is cracking buying in Brisbane. It's near impossible now to get a 6% net yield on an industrial property in Brisbane. So we're getting this one that we actually know that's under rented. So we're like, oh, we're gonna pay like we know it's under rented, the yield. We negotiate based on the current rent. Normally what happens is the agent will be like, oh no, the actual rent's this, and try to negotiate there. So you kind of come halfway there. So we looked at this one and we're like, okay, this rent, we know this rent's under because we've bought here before. There's room to move. We actually have to wait until the end of 2026 to realize it. So we're just going to make sure that we're actually in due diligence. We're verifying the rents, verifying the vacancy rates, and then bump the rent up. One of the points I want to note on this one though is they actually had two 5-year terms. So they're there from 2021 and they finish at the end of 2026. And then there's another 5-year lease option. On paper, that sounds bloody amazing. You're like, sweet, this is a good tenant. If we talk to them, they're going to stay there. Happy days. But did we proceed?
Oh, all right. We got one more chance at it, team. Last one for the evening. While everybody's doing the poll. All right, all the answers are in. We have got 75% say deal, 25% no deal.
It's a deal.
Hey, there we
I do want to
go.
point out though,
There you
Tim,
go.
We got one.
I want to point out though, it wasn't smooth sailing though. So one of the issues we found in due diligence, and this is part of commercial, is you can fix the issues as part of due diligence. Normally what happens when you've got two lease terms, and I alluded to it with the two 5-year lease terms, this one only had 3% fixed rental increases, which is why it was severely under rented because the market was moving at 7 to 9%. Industrial, some areas went up 10, 15% per year. And that's one of the reasons we see. But when we actually did a lease review, normally what happens at the end of a lease term, you have a market review. This one was a very, very obscure one, and they actually didn't have a market review. They were able to just take up the next option and stay at 3%. So we actually, when we found that, went back to the agent and through the lawyers as well, saying, hey, look, we're not happy with this. Like this property is going to be severely, severely under rented. Are you okay for us to do a lease variation? And we actually spoke to the tenant, and they were aware they were paying under rent. And we actually got a lease variation to allow for a market review at the end of the time. Hence, we can bump the rent back up and go. But like I said, if they said no to that, we would have walked away because who wants to own a property for the next 7, 8 years with only 3% when the market's moving more than that? So even though location's good, tenant was great, everything stacked up, little things like that, lease review can really trip you up. And that was why I was being a bit facetious today with the no deals, and I consciously took the piss out a little bit. But I wanted to show
they're the ones that you learn from though, and I think it's really important.
Well, I didn't want to just show pretty pictures and be like, look at this great deal, use my service, look at this great deal. I wanted to show you the weird, peculiar things that can go wrong with commercial. And you don't have to use my services. You can get my checklist. It's on my website. Everything we've just checked there, I literally show you how to do it. But you have to do the grunt work. Like there's 20, 30 hours per property there. Resi, you can get by with a few hours. No offense. But commercial.
No, I completely agree with you. Every time we have these sessions with you, Steve, you scare the hell out of me. To be completely honest, the amount of due diligence that's required on a commercial property. I've been thinking about putting one in my self-managed super fund, and I just know that I don't have the time to put into commercial. I don't have the know-how. And for anybody watching out there, Steve's got a great course that he offers, which basically steps you through and teaches you exactly how to do it. So if you
and it's free.
it's free. It's an amazing course, and you can probably tell from what you've seen tonight with Steve. He doesn't hide any of the addresses. He's completely transparent about this sort of stuff because he does aim to educate. So I urge anybody, if you're interested in it, certainly reach out to Steve.
There's no reason you can do it yourself. I've got a 300-page book I give away free, due diligence, and like I said, a 10-hour course that walks you through it. But I hate when, like, actually I shouldn't say hate, but when people like you say I'm scared of commercial, and you should be, but it's also why I know I'm going to be okay in my personal portfolio because I'm doing this.
Mm.
I'm mitigating 99.9% of the risk because I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's you can't just jump in and I get people that go, they send me a link and they go, "Oh, what are your thoughts on this property, Steve?" And I go, "You've got to do 3 or 4 hours before you can even send me that link just to
Mm.
actually say, is it a good deal?" Then you get it under contract.
Yeah.
Then you got to do the real work. But I'll do salesman Steve here. You get 3 times the rent with commercial and the exact same capital growth. So what is the benefit of buying residential? Anything you can do in residential, I can do in literally a third the time.
Yeah.
So that's the power of commercial. Like my little shopping center in 7 years' time, bought 3.1 mil shopping center, will give me more than 250 grand passive income and be paid off
Mm.
debt free. Like to get that in residential, I need a 12 mil portfolio, and that's
Yeah.
the power.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. All right. Well, heading over to questions. The first one, I've got lots of comments on there saying great presentation. So thank you very much, Steve, and also for coming in nice and early over there in the UK. The first question we've got is from Sarah, who's asking, how much does your due diligence change when it's a self-managed super fund for commercial? It's a good question.
Not at all. A good property is a good property.
Yep.
I think what she might be getting at is, do I change the type of property that I buy?
Yeah,
The
that's
due
what I was going. Is it
diligence,
type, but also knowing that you can't sort of leverage off it and everything. Is there, are you changing your budget or anything like that based on SMSF? Is there any other considerations?
no, because budget's always relative. Someone who's got 800 grand in their self-managed super fund is treated differently to someone who's got 200 grand in the self-managed super fund. It comes down to two things. So typically there's only two strategies you'll do in a self-managed super fund. Outside of that, there's probably about 5 or 6.
Hmm.
Most of our clients just want the set and forget.
Yeah.
So like the only difference I probably do is I don't chase yield. I don't
Mhm.
go out and go buy a 7% yielding one with high vacancy rates because this needs to be a nest egg that just has a bulletproof tenant on long leases and always remains tenanted
Mhm.
because it's going to be this nest egg for their future down the track.
Yep.
So I don't chase yield, I chase capital growth and rental increases and security. So I buy, instead of going out buying 7%, I'll probably target like a 5.5% blue chip kind of
Yep.
location. However, we get some clients that actually want to do value adds with the reason for upselling. So one of our clients has turned a 600 grand commercial over the last 5 years into a $2.2 million one in his super because we did value add. He had excess funds. We built like a mezzanine area, sold the property at a 30% premium, then bought the next one for, I think it was like 800 or 900. And then we
Mhm.
sold that, bought the next one for, that's a very active strategy though. So that's not really a self-managed super fund strategy.
Yeah.
It's just an accumulation strategy that they're doing. But to answer a question, you just want to buy something bulletproof. Like
Yep.
I don't even look at my self-managed super fund. I want my properties to be the same thing where I don't even have to think about it.
Mm.
As you know, there's awesome tax advantages for self-managed super fund. Even more so with like if you've got a property, like let's say we buy I don't know, $1 million commercial property on 6% yield. In 15 years' time, that rent's probably going to be circa 120, 130 grand. That's tax-free income for
Mm.
retirement. Like
Yeah.
that is bloody powerful. If
Yeah,
you're
that's
as
exactly right.
if you're outside that and you're paying 30, 40, 50% tax, like you're eroding that quite a lot. So there are some huge advantages
Yeah, some
for
good points.
self-managed funds.
I've got a couple more. We'll start. This one's anonymous, but does Victoria still tick the boxes with their high land tax and stamp duty?
I'm getting asked this almost every day at the moment. We still look there and we buy about one a month in Victoria, mainly industrial. Occasionally we get a retail. I never get put off by tax. It should never
Mhm.
be a fundamental reason you walk away from a property if the rest of the figures make sense.
Mhm.
It's the same as why like we bought 5 years ago for our clients in Townsville and they've
Mhm.
done really well. Yes, you're paying higher insurance premiums and things like that. So like you just got to look at the net result. So I'm
Yeah.
not against it. The main reason we're not buying in Melbourne is the yields are actually surprisingly sharp. Like you're getting like 4.5% net yields on an industrial. And then I start showing you like some of the deals I showed you there where we're getting 6.5. We're literally getting 50% more rent and a freestanding site like that one I showed you over in Port Kennedy,
Mm.
a huge site, freestanding. Where for that same price, we are literally getting 80 square meter warehouse out
Mm.
of 40 houses. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
with the tax issues plus not getting the yield, I'm kind of like I can do better.
Yeah.
Um, and every second buyer's agent's also looking there at the moment as well.
Yeah.
So I can't see it. I'm not against it, and those tax things always seem to work themselves out long term. But for me, I think there's better opportunities
Yeah.
elsewhere.
I'd agree. I've got a good one here from Richard. Where do you get the vacancy rates and growth returns for the various commercial properties?
Oh, really, really good question.
Yeah,
So this is the most annoying part of commercial.
it doesn't
Um,
exist.
well,
It
it
does, but it
does.
doesn't. Yeah.
No, I'll answer it in two parts. First part, industrial. So say I get an industrial property. The first point of call is you go on Core Logic, so RP data, and go find every warehouse. So I literally click through, if you're buying a body corporate one, click through every body corporate warehouse in that complex, then the adjoining complexes, then the other complexes, and go look at the leasing campaigns. And it won't give you exactly, but you'll be able to see if it was had a leasing campaign for 2 months. Yeah, okay, it might be 3 months. That'll give you your first gauge. Then the next phase is you need to go talk to two or three property managers, commercial property managers, that is, and find out exactly addresses, how long times for an industrial, there'll be 30 properties within a 3 kilometer radius because the location's not as specific as retail. Like, so it's like they're going to rent a space. That's kind of what they're going to do. Um, and we'll actually show like this one was vacant for 1 month, this one was 2 months. It's the worst boring
Mm,
part of doing it, but you have to do it. That's where you get vacant. There's no website, there's no SQM of just like, oh, what's the vacancy rate?
mm,
Because it's commercial, it's not public. You can't even find out what rent they're getting.
mm,
Like you have to actually talk to the property manager. And you have to have the good thing about using a buyer's agent. We've got the relationships, and we've been buying 2,000 deals over the last 6 years, kind of thing. Like we know our one, plus the due diligence we've done on the other properties. We can do it a bit quicker. But
mm.
that's a really long, grueling part of the job.
Yeah.
For retail, I want to touch on this because this is the other thing we buy. You can only really look in similar properties. So like I'll use my little shopping center. I bought a shopping center in Regent's Park, which is in the Logan area. It's 8 shops, freestanding. There's no other shops to within a 1.5 kilometer radius. So it's about five square kilometers of zone though. I think me looking 1.5 kilometers away at another retail strip means nothing to vacancy
Mm.
because completely
It could be
different
same
foot
postcode
traffic.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same foot traffic, road traffic. Even funnily enough, you can like go one street back from a main road,
Mm,
completely different as well. So the only thing I had on that one was to look at my complex the last 10 years
mm,
and hope that the pattern occurs. The good thing about something like that is if I can show that the population's grown in the last 10 years and they haven't built any more retail, cool, there should be more demand
mm,
for it than there was in the past. And that's where you look at zoning and talk to town planners and hopefully they start building townhouses instead of houses, etc. But that's foot traffic, road traffic. You have to do on the ground. Last week, I actually flew to Perth. We bought a shopping centre over in Scarborough in
mhm,
Perth,
yep.
and it was a big one. It's like a $5 million one. We actually had to go on the ground different times a day, look at road
Mm,
cars coming in, coming, look, doing all that. Like that's again physical in-person work as well, which most resi investors just aren't willing to do.
mm. Yeah, interesting. And another question, we'll probably have to make this the last one. Let's jump with Andy. Andy, what type of commercial property do you suggest for first self-managed super fund property under 400,000 or 500,000? That's
Oh, okay.
very
Really,
broad.
really good question.
Mm,
Before you said four or
very
five hundred
specific.
thousand, I was gonna say industrial,
Hmm.
just because it's easier to get confidence in the numbers. Because
Yeah.
if I can show you like all the other ones in the complex had less than a 3 month vacancy rate, cool. We're confident with those numbers that you're never gonna have more than 3%, 3 month vacancy rate. The budget is a tighter budget though.
Mm,
So you will get, if you go an industrial at that price point, you're not going to get long leases. You're going to get a small sole trader who's renting the space or like a storage type one. They come and go every, say, 3 to 5 years. They also only sign 12-month leases. So they're a bit more of a volatile tenant.
mhm,
Not a bad one. Like my brother who works in my team buys multiple 500K ones and he diversifies that
mm,
way. However, very hard to get a good yield, a good versatile property in a good location.
mm,
Retail for that price, you can actually still buy like a little shop with like a 3, 5 year lease on it. So I'd be looking there, but it's harder to look for retail because if I tell him go out and find retail, he's got to look Australia wide.
yeah.
Whereas at least with industrial, I can say, hey, this Port Kennedy and Rockingham where I showed before, you can get a 500K warehouse there. So he can just keep an eye on that market for
Mm.
3 or 4 months. Might be a bit easier for him. Or use a buyer's agent who's got literally 18 people in his team looking full time for him and can present you deals that way as well.
That's all right. All right. Well, look, there are a couple more questions, but we have run out of time, and it is 8:05 p.m. over here in Melbourne. Steve, thank you very much for joining us from the other side of the world. Thanks for making the time and sharing very generously a lot of your insights. So if anyone does want to reach out with Steve, it's stevepalise.com, and we look forward to having a chat again with you soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Go on,
Pleasure.
you safe. Chat soon. Thank you, everybody. See you next
Thanks,
time.
guys.